Most dreaded man-eater of Botta-Singarum. Taken from the book, Hunting Grounds of the Old World, by Colonel Henry Astbury Leveson, also known as the Old Shekari. These incidents took place near Batasingaram, historically known as Botta-Singarum, near outskirts of present Hyderabad. On a fine morning of March in the early 1800s, I arrived at the village of Mulkapoor, 2 days' march from Hyderabad, leading irregular cavalry and 2 companies of native infantry. We served as the escort for a begum, a noblewoman, and her daughter, who were traveling with a large entourage to the Presidency. The cavalcade featured a colorful array of elephants, camels, palanquins, carts, and other vehicles, accompanied by a large group of extravagantly dressed mounted attendants. The main figures stayed in a public bungalow surrounded by high canvas walls, with sentries and black eunuchs, interpreted as black African slaves, guarding the area to ensure privacy and restrict access, particularly to the women's quarters. The air was thick with the scent of earth, and the noise of a camp in rapid construction. The troops and camp followers moved with practiced precision, their swift hands raising tents, tying ropes, and settling animals with a rhythm born of countless such expeditions. The once peaceful clearing near the travelers' bungalow now buzzed with life, transforming before my eyes into a temporary home of soldiers, guides, and servants. Everywhere I looked, there was motion, men carrying supplies, horses stamping the ground, and the low murmur of conversations blending with the calls of unseen birds. Beyond the camp, the wilderness of Mulkapoor lay in its untamed beauty. The hills, some thick with jungle and others crowned with sheer, jagged cliffs, rose high into the sky, their peaks sharp against the horizon. Towering forest trees stood like silent sentinels, casting long shadows over the dense undergrowth, the whole landscape alive with the promise of adventure. I turned to Chinya, who was standing near the fire, his face lit by the flickering flames. "Well, Chinya," I asked, "what news of Shekar have you got?" He straightened up, his dark eyes bright with excitement. "Boat Acha Kabar Hai, Sahib," he answered, his voice full of enthusiasm. "All people tell that, near Botta-Singarum, one village 2 kos off, they got one Barabag, big tiger, Sahib, who kill plenty men." I leaned in, intrigued. "A tiger," I repeated, the thought sending a chill down my spine. "Yes, Sahib," he continued, shaking his head, a slight grin playing at the corner of his lips. Kistima said, "This man here, he tell, eat one old woman yesterday. Bohat Shaitan Hai, Sahib, great devil, Sahib, that one. All Shekar men, and village people, plenty looking for him. But when they all come home, the tiger, he go and kill one man again." I raised an eyebrow. "A clever one, this tiger. A real thief of the forest, I suppose." "Woe Barachor Hai, Sahib," Chinya exclaimed. "Great thief, yes. He know how to hide, Sahib. All the men and villagers, they look everywhere, but never find him." He paused, looking toward the hills, his voice turning reverential. "Oh, Sahib, this very good Shekar country. All animals plenty got here. Suppose master stop here few days, plenty shooting." His eyes sparkled at the thought of the hunt. I could not help but smile at the prospect. It seemed that Mulkapoor, with its savage beauty and its mysterious, deadly inhabitants, was not a place to be taken lightly. The tiger's presence only heightened the allure of the hunt. It would be a journey full of danger, excitement, and perhaps a bit of mystery. Kistima said, "This Dobi man, very good Shekari, know all this country, shoot plenty years in this jungle. Other day kill one cheetah, now bring master skin. Suppose some gentlemen want buggy mat." I instructed a group to head to a village called Botta-Singarum, to gather information about a tiger's whereabouts. They were told to promise the villagers rewards, for their help and to avoid shooting deer or peafowl along the way. Next day, after breakfast, I planned to join them with my peon Kistima. I also invited the officers to join the hunt for the man-eater tiger, while the doctor, who had other commitments involving the begum, the noble lady, would stay behind to manage the camp and oversee the arrangements for dinner and entertainment. The kind-hearted, old Scotsman William had urged the group to go and kill the tiger, warning them to avoid being harmed in the process. He didn't want anyone hurt. During breakfast, various plans for dealing with the tiger were discussed, but no clear course of action was decided. After the meal, they put on their hunting gear, mounted their horses, and set off for Botta-Singarum, each accompanied by a horsekeeper with a weapon. Kistima, leading the way, explained that the tiger was unusually cunning, making it hard to predict its moves. He mentioned that it ignored healthy bullocks and had devoured a man watching cattle without harming the herd. The tiger was notorious for being elusive, rarely showing itself, and never staying in one place for long. It had killed over 40 people in the past 6 months, and few post-runners had been missing, likely taken by the beast. Because of the fear it inspired, post-runners now traveled in groups, armed and cautious. Kistima, having followed the tiger's trail for days, described a close encounter, where he saw the tiger drinking. But it escaped before he could take a shot. He noted the tiger's unusual dirty yellow color, different from other tigers, and said it had been nearly impossible to approach without it fleeing. I told Kistima that the only way to determine the tiger's skin color was to catch him, and I outlined the plan. Upon arriving at the village, I instructed the Tahsildar to gather as many beaters as possible to be ready at dawn the next day, and we would attempt to flush the tiger out. For the day, we would follow his trail and visit places where he had recently been seen, hoping for good luck in finding him. Kistima agreed with the plan, but expressed doubt due to the tiger's age and cunning, although he was determined to catch him. When we reached the village, I sent Kistima ahead to inform the headman of our arrival. He met us as we entered, and we took our seats under a large tamarind tree, in front of the police station. After the usual greetings, the village's headman told us about the tiger's devastation in nearby villages, and promised full support in locating and killing the beast. After organizing the beaters for the next morning, we set out with some villagers to a well about 150 yards from the village, where a woman had been taken by the tiger the previous evening while drawing water. I had carefully examined the area, and although the tiger's pug marks near the well had been erased by a flock of goats, they were clearly visible near a tamarind tree a little farther off, along with signs of dried blood and long hairs stuck on the roots of bushes. I also noticed a spot behind a bush, where the grass was pressed down, and the marks in the dust indicated that the tiger had been lying in wait for some time before attacking its prey. I found Chinya, the Dobi, and the rest of the group in deep discussion and overheard the end of a long string of curses, maledictions, and prophecies, where everyone agreed that a female tiger with 2 cubs, which crossed our path, were not anything but virtuous. I observed that the tiger's retreat did not follow the same path as its approach, and it seemed to have circled the village several times, before finding its victim. I traced the marks through some open custard apple jungle to the dry, sandy bed of a watercourse, where the trail was clear. Although there were no visible blood marks, I knew the tiger was still carrying its victim because the pug marks of its front feet were deeper in the sand than those of the hind feet, indicating the extra weight it carried in its mouth. A little further on, I found a large patch of dry blood, with flies buzzing around it, and the marks in the sand suggested that the tiger had briefly laid down the body to perhaps get a better grip. While showing this to William, I noticed marks in the sand that led me to believe the victim was not quite dead at the time, as there were signs of convulsive hand clutches in sand. I tracked the tiger down the nullah for over a mile, until we reached a pool of water. The steep banks, covered in dense thorny jungle, made the trail more difficult to follow. Here, the tiger's tracks were blurred by those of other animals, including bears, a cheetah, and various deer, pigs, and jungle sheep. Near the pool, I saw signs that the tiger had laid the body down while drinking, with impressions in the sand surrounded by buzzing flies. Though there were no blood stains, it was clear something had attracted them, and 2 distinct trails showed the tiger had returned to the body after drinking. As we continued along the trail, We disturbed herds of spotted deer and pigs and saw a female bear with 2 cubs, but we let them go undisturbed, focused on the tiger. We went another 2 miles until we reached a place with high grass, where the nullah split into 2 courses for about 80 yards before joining again to form an island covered with dry grass, reeds, and brushwood. Here, the man-eater's trail was crossed by that of a tigress and her cubs. We could still distinguish the man-eater's tracks by their unique form, and continued following them for another half-mile, where the trail led us into dense, thorny jungle. As we made our way through it, I pointed out pieces of rag and long hair caught in the thorns, showing that the tiger had brought its victim that way. I instructed the men to prepare for a possible surprise, directing William to guard the rear and prevent straggling, while Chinya stayed close with a second gun and Ringaswamy cleared the path ahead quietly. They moved through the thick jungle in single file, struggling through the dark, dense foliage. The silence was occasionally broken by the sound of twigs snapping, low grunts from the men as they were pricked by thorns, or distant animal sounds like sambar barking or deer bolting. As they advanced, the trail remained visible until I thought they heard a noise. He signaled the group to stop, dropped to the ground to listen, and they heard grating sounds, like bones being gnawed, along with low growls and snarls. I noticed Chinya's eyes sparkling with excitement, as he listened to the ominous noises, and the way he grabbed at the few bristles on his chin showed what was on his mind. Though no words were spoken, I saw the gang's eyes following my movements. I checked my rifle, and signaled to Chinya and Mac to follow, cautioning the others to remain quiet until they heard a shot. We moved forward cautiously, stopping occasionally to reconnoiter. After struggling through dense undergrowth for about 100 yards, the noise grew louder, and we emerged into an open glade with a large black rock surrounded by jungle. We pushed through the dense underbrush with great difficulty, the thick vegetation nearly blocking our way. Every step we took seemed to amplify the eerie sounds ahead, and soon, the noise became unmistakable, clearer, sharper. At last, we emerged into a small, open glade, the air pungent with the earthy scent of the jungle. To one side, a large black rock loomed like a sentinel, its dark surface a stark contrast to the vibrant green surrounding it. My gaze swept cautiously around, and that's when I saw them. 2 jackals, their matted fur stained with blood, were hunched over some half-stripped human bones, tearing at the flesh with a grotesque savagery. As soon as they caught our scent, they froze, their eyes gleaming with malice, before slinking away with low growls, disappearing into the thick undergrowth. My heart pounded in my chest as I surveyed the scene, ensuring the object of our search wasn't in plain sight. Gently, I gave a low whistle, signaling the rest of the group. They emerged from the bushes, silent and alert, eyes scanning the grisly scene. This was clearly the hecatomb of the man-eater. The bones and skulls of at least 23 victims, both men and women, were scattered across the ground. I counted the skulls, the dismembered bodies, the fragments of clothing, and broken bangles, distinctly feminine, their gold and silver ornaments glinting dully in the dim light. The hair, the unmistakable markers of native women, were clear signs of their tragic fate. We collected 2 bulky silver bangles, from the remains of the last victim. Her tattoos, still visible on the fresh body, were recognized by one of the villagers with us. We also found 2 gold tikas, neck ornaments marking a married woman, and a knife that the Dobi immediately identified as belonging to a post-runner, killed about a month ago. The horror of the scene was very disconcerting and ghastly. The stench of decay and rotting flesh was unbearable. The smell of remains mixed with the sour air of the jungle, making it difficult to breathe. We were eager to leave, to escape into the fresh air once more, and I gave orders for the remains to be collected, but not buried yet, until the village authorities had seen them. I suspected that some of the remains would be recognized, and their families would want to conduct the proper rites. "What a fearfully sickening sight," said Mac, his voice tinged with unease. "I feel quite queer, and I'll be off color for a week after this. I wish we had some beer, William muttered, his voice filled with something close to a sigh. I need a drink to wash the taste of this tainted air from my throat. It's half suffocated me. Come, Chinia, he added, turning to our companion. Bring out your master's brandy flask. We need something to steady us after this. Poor little woman, my subordinate Jock remarked, his voice soft with sorrow. Look, here's a long lock of her hair, attached to a piece of scalp. I found it stuck to my boot as I came out. I'll keep it as a souvenir. Well, I said, wiping my brow, the weight of the scene heavy in my chest, the only souvenir I'd care to keep from today's horrors would be the skull of the man-eater. And if my right hand hasn't forgotten its skill, if my rifle doesn't fail me, thank the Bishop of Bond Street and Wesley Richards, it never has yet, that trophy will be mine. I won't rest until I've bagged that beast, and I'll leave no stone unturned until I do. The gang stayed at Botta-Singarum overnight, to be ready for work at dawn. They decided to ask for volunteers from the detachment, and let the steadiest men bring their muzzle loaders to defend the line of beaters, with the understanding that no one would fire at other game until their target was found. Afterward, they would finish the day with a general beat, bagging everything. William agreed, emphasizing that no shots should be fired at deer or hog to avoid losing a chance. As it was getting late, they returned to the village to confirm arrangements with the police, mounted their horses, and headed back to camp. They discussed the events of the day, their hopes for the next day. After late-night festivity, next morning, they set off for a hunt at Botta-Singarum, assembling their forces, sepoys, troopers, and villagers armed to the teeth. They formed a large circle, with the river as its base, to hunt a tigress and its cubs. But the hunt took a deadly turn, when the tigress, cornered by fire and smoke, charged out, mauling William's horsekeeper before the doctor shot it dead. The hunt continued, despite the tragedy. They encountered and took down wild boars, sambar deer, spotted deer, and even bears. At one point, a massive tiger, but not the man-eater, appeared, and the doctor shot it cleanly. The day's hunt was successful. 2 ordinary tigers, 3 cheetahs, 3 bears, and many other animals were hunted. They returned to the village, where the villagers celebrated their success with music, dancing, and songs, honoring the day's triumph and the doctor's leadership. As I was preparing for a brief rest, Chinia, my head Shekari, arrived with a grin, informing me that the Patel of Botta-Singarum village had reported a tiger near the outskirts, seen just after our return to camp. Suspicious, I quickly sent for the Dobi, Kistima, and the rest of the gang, along with my guns, to gather more details. After questioning the villager who delivered the message, I arranged a meeting and, after a short rest and breakfast, set off to join my group at the Botta-Singarum police station. Guided by a villager, I reached the spot where the tiger had been seen. The trail was fresh, with clear signs of its presence. I left my horse and, with the gang, tracked the tiger through a dense ravine. The trail became difficult to follow as the tiger had been circling in the dry nulla bed, confusing our efforts. For nearly half an hour, we wandered in circles, unsure of our direction. Then, I heard the unmistakable call of Guglu, signaling that he had picked up the scent. The gang rallied, following the sound of his call to a pool of water where the tiger had recently drunk. The disturbed water confirmed it. The trail led into thick jungle, impassable without axes. Realizing stalking would be impossible, I consulted with my team. I felt sure the tiger was nearby, hidden in the jungle, and the yells of frightened monkeys confirmed my suspicion. Kistima, recalling previous encounters, warned that the tiger often waited near a bend in the road, suggesting he could be watching us. A tense silence fell over the group. The tiger had instilled a deep fear in them, making them cautious and almost superstitious. Kistima then proposed a dangerous plan that I would dress as a post runner and walk the main road at sunset, when the tiger typically hunted, in hopes of getting a shot, to which I gave my consent. The gang reacted nervously, voicing their concern, but the plan was set, one last, risky attempt to confront the cunning man-eater lurking nearby. The plan had not won much favor among the bystanders, as I could tell from the shaking heads and murmurs. However, Chinia, Dobi, and a few others supported it, with Kistima volunteering to accompany me as the post runner. I declined, believing I'd have a better chance of encountering the tiger alone. With the plan in place, I returned to the village, obtained a bamboo staff from the patel, and modified it to jingle like a post runner's bell as I walked. Armed with a short rifle, pistols, and a large shikar knife, I set off with Kistima, leaving the rest of the group behind, and soon came upon a narrow ravine, where dry, sandy ground was tangled with grass and thorn bushes. Kistima pointed out a thick jungle patch, where the tiger often hid. We found some old trails, but no fresh signs of its presence. The area was eerily still, the oppressive heat and decayed vegetation thickening the air. After scouting the terrain, I felt drained and returned to the group, who were resting in the shade of a dense jungle bower. The silence was broken only by distant bird calls. The jungle's strange beauty hid its dangers, fevers and poison lurked in the air. Exhausted, I slept for hours, and when I woke, the sun was low. Refreshed, I readied myself for the task ahead. As the sun dipped lower, I carefully examined my arms to ensure I hadn't been spotted. My gang, some of whom had been on watch, had seen nothing. I instructed them to stay put and only approach if they heard the sound of my gun. If not, they were to remain silent. I led Chinia, Kistima, Uglu, and the Dobi with spare guns, just in case. Reaching a vantage point over the ravine, I sent him up trees to keep watch. Kistima begged to join me, fearing the tiger would attack from behind, but I refused. Two of us might scare it off, and I needed silence to hear any movement. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the road as I walked slowly, my every step deliberates, each one placing me nearer to the place where countless lives had been claimed. Despite my outward composure, a chill ran down my spine, and cold beads of sweat formed on my forehead. It was as if the very air carried the weight of the past, thick with the echoes of the victim's suffering. I passed the old rock, my eyes darting around constantly, ears straining for the faintest hint of movement. The air was alive with sound, but none of it felt natural. The incessant chirping of two bulbuls, squabbling in a bush by the roadside, grated on my nerves, their calls a maddening reminder of the serene world I had left behind. Partridges called loudly from the underbrush, their voices sharp, urgent. And then, as I neared the watercourse, a shadow slipped through the long grass, a jackal, skulking low, eyes glinting as it moved with predatory grace. I stopped, shaking my jingling affair, listening intently. The world around me was tense, but nothing stirred in the silence that followed. Every sound seemed amplified in the stillness, every rustle a potential threat. My heart quickened. As I began to climb the opposite side of the ravine, a faint crackle reached my ears, like the sound of dry leaves crushed underfoot. I froze. Every muscle tensed. I turned to the left, my eyes searching the tall grass. And there it was. A movement, subtle but unmistakable, a wave in the tall blades. Something was making its way toward me. My breath caught in my throat. Then, that sound. A low, guttural purr, closer now, followed by the flickering movement of something behind a clump of brush and grass, not more than 10 paces away. I felt the hairs on my neck rise. The moment was critical. I stepped back, shifting my position just slightly. The movement stopped, and I held my breath, eyes locked on the spot where I had last seen it. Then, like a bolt of lightning, it sprang into the open, the massive shape of the tiger landing with a thundering crash, just 6 feet away from where I had stood. My heart slammed in my chest, but I didn't hesitate. My hands, steady from years of training, brought the rifle to my shoulder, and I fired. The shot rang out, sharp and final. When the smoke cleared, I saw the beast convulsing in the dirt, rolling and thrashing as death overtook it. The bullet had found its mark, slicing through its neck and sinking into its chest. For a moment, There was only the sound of the tiger's final, desperate gasps. Then, as I stepped aside, I fired my second shot. A clean kill. The dark blood poured from the creature's nostrils, and a shudder rippled through its body before all fell still. The man-eater was dead. His reign of terror was over. My gang came rushing up, breathless with excitement, their faces alight with relief. Loud cheers erupted as Kistima, his eyes wide in recognition, identified the beast, the very tiger that had haunted these lands, leaving a trail of death and fear in its wake. It was a mangy, pitiful sight, its coat patchy and its reddish-brown skin barely covered. But the trophy was not worth taking. The victory lay in the hunt. I ordered Chinya to sever the right paw with his axe, and sent a post-runner into camp to deliver the grim trophy and announce our success. The scourge vanquished. A bullock cart was soon fetched from the village, and with great effort, the lifeless carcass was hoisted aboard. But the bullocks, terrified by the tiger's lingering scent, would not let themselves be harnessed to the cart. No amount of coaxing or force could bring them close enough to place the yokes on their necks. The villagers, bursting with pride, dragged the beast off in triumph. The whole village turned out to witness our return. Religious ceremonies, or pujas, were conducted, sheep and cocks sacrificed, and prayers offered up to various swamis, Hindu gods, in my name. I became the center of attention for all the young girls, their dark, sparkling eyes gleaming as they waved their hands, in greeting from either side of the road. The elderly women, however, were a different story. They crowded around me, their devotion overwhelming. They kissed the hem of my old green baize shooting coat, cracked their knuckles over my forehead for luck, stroked my face and beard, patted me on the back, and, becoming so fervent in their attention, I had to beg my gang to keep them at bay. The men of the village had gathered with torches and fire sticks, forming a procession to escort me back to camp. Rockets shot into the sky, fireworks lit up the night, and the sounds of matchlocks firing, tom-toms beating, dub-ties echoing, and cholera horns blaring filled the air in joyous celebration. The dead tiger's head, mounted on a spear, was carried at the front of the procession. My gang marched proudly at the head of the parade, while 5 ancient village dancers, their movements wild and uninhibited, pirouetted and howled in a frenzy before the cart. Their whirling reminded me strongly of the witches' dance in Macbeth. The entire camp came out to see the carcass of the man-eater, and that evening, I was showered with congratulations from all sides. I gave a few sheep and fowls to my gang, along with some raki, and the night echoed with revelry. The next morning, the mutilated remains of the tiger were paraded in a cart through all the nearby villages by Kistima and the Dobi, who, by collecting contributions in either coin or kind, made a small fortune from the event. I have killed many tigers both before and after, but none like this one. This beast had been a true menace, reputed to have claimed over 100 lives. It perfectly embodied an old Indian saying, "When a tiger has once tasted human blood, it will never follow other game, for men are an easier prey." Where the tiger fell, a grand mausoleum now stands. Passers-by contribute by tossing stones, gradually forming a large mound. To this day, travelers stop at the public bungalow to hear the tale of the infamous Admi Kana Walla, man-eater, while the old pension sepoy, who now oversees the site, tells them of the tiger's demise. And old friends of mine told me that many anxious and kind inquiries have been made as to the health and welfare of the black-bearded cavalry officer who brought down the terror of the land. The end.